headlines, the controversy with China and Daryl, what he said, Morey, what he said, and the comments that he made, the tweet that he made about Hong Kong. And the NBA's response in the beginning used the word regrettable when talking about the outcome of that tweet, of his comments. And you received some criticism initially for the first response. Since that time, you've gone on the offensive, and you have said that you support free speech. So can you clarify your position?
Absolutely. And just to be clear, we did use the word regrettable initially, but the regrettable was modifying the fact that we had upset our Chinese fans. And maybe a mistake or not, but I think, it's too long an answer, but basketball has a very long history in China. After James Naismith invented it as a Christian missionary in Massachusetts in the late 1890s, one of the first things those missionaries did was to bring basketball to China. China participated in the Olympics in the 1930s in basketball. First NBA team played in China in 1979. We've been on air with CCTV in China for over 30 years. And last season, over 600 million people in China watched a portion of an NBA game. So the regrettable notion was that we had upset our fans. I didn't think at that time, while we were saying we regretted upsetting our fans, that also at the same time supporting Daryl Morey's right to express himself, right to tweet. Obviously, we made clear that we were being asked to fire him by the Chinese government, by the parties we dealt with, government and business. We said there's no chance that's happening. There's no chance we'll even discipline him. So in that context, I was saying on one hand we were supporting free expression, but again, maybe I was trying too hard to be a diplomat in saying that we understand, though, that the reaction, by the way, not by the government, there was no regret that directed to the government, to our fans. As I said, hundreds of millions of them in China. Subsequently, because I saw that, in my mind, that was being misinterpreted, we wanted to make an absolute clear statement that the values of the NBA, these American values, we are an American business, travel with us wherever we go. Mm-hmm. And one of those values is free expression. And we wanted to make sure that everyone understood we were supporting free expression and also making clear that the Chinese people, again, less about the government, but our Chinese fans understood that providing a platform for freedom of expression is different than adjudicating a particular point of view. And so I didn't see it as my role as commissioner of the NBA to weigh in on the substance of the protest, but to say, here's this platform. And in fact, Joe Tsai, the new owner of the Brooklyn Nets here in New York, also wrote a piece in which he wanted to give a Chinese perspective on how they saw the activities in Hong Kong, and I thought that's perfectly appropriate too.
In taking your stance and being supportive, you and the league, are you willing to absorb the possible loss that may come, financial loss that may come from this support?
Not only willing, but we are. The losses have already been substantial. Our games are not back on the air in China as we speak, and we'll see what happens next. Again, the coverage, frankly, was confusing to me when I got home. I was over in China at the time, only because I thought we'd taken a principled position. I thought we hadn't so-called acquiesced to the Chinese. I understand there is a point of view from some that we shouldn't be in business at all in China. And I'd say from an intellectual standpoint, if that's fair, not getting into whether the tweet or the response to it, but if people believe that we shouldn't be engaged in commerce in China, or frankly in other places in the world where they don't approve of their practices or government, okay, but then we're in the middle, again, I sort of at some point look to the American government. We're in the middle of negotiating a trade agreement. Many multinational corporations obviously trade extensively with China, and if that's ultimately how our government feels we should be dealing with China, again, we are a U.S. company. But just to finish off the answer, the reason I gave a little bit of the history on the NBA in China is we've always felt that constructive engagement, especially in sports, is very positive. And in a way, it relates to what we're about to talk about in terms of mental health. Even that earlier production of Dear Evan Hansen, I mean, whether it's through the arts, talking about mental health, whether it's talking about building relationship through sports. Your background is in sports. You've been all over the world in sports, and it brings people together, often in a way that governments don't. Our own State Department calls it people-to-people exchanges. And I think when you build that commonality, over time, it potentially leads to shared understandings, empathy, begins dialogues, often things that aren't happening at high levels among official government operatives or diplomats. That it is a sense. So for me, in terms of my disappointment while I was over there, I've been going to China for, plus more than 15 years where we've been playing where the NBA, modern NBA, has been playing games there, and going multiple times a year. And again, I felt we had made enormous progress in terms of building cultural exchanges with the Chinese people. And I have regret that much of that was lost. And I'm not even sure where we'll go from here, but the direct answer to your question is that the financial consequences have been and may continue to be fairly dramatic.